Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Inshallah, today I wanted to go through now a few practical steps in spiritual wayfaring. We've gone through a few principles, and inshallah those principles are enough for now as a scaffolding to enter the practical aspects. The first station in spiritual wayfaring, or the first step, but they usually use the word station for a particular reason, is what they call yaqadha, which means awakening. Awakening from the sleep of ignorance. Awakening from spiritual fatigue, spiritual lethargy, spiritual idleness. Or, in other words, awakening from being oblivious to your origins, min aina, if you recall the last 2 days. Oblivious to ila aina, where you're going and why you're here. It's kind of awakening from being oblivious to these vital, important processes of thinking, of action. The first step, we want to get out of this heavy sleep, this sleep of ignorance, and to wake up. We want to be attentive to how backward we are and how forward we have to be. Now, this is the first station. Now, many station here in Arabic, they say manzil. Many ulama don't regard this as the first station because they say it doesn't qualify to be called a station. Although it's a technical point, but it's worth mentioning for you to know. They say for a station to qualify as a station, there has to be some traveling to Allah. And then after traveling, the traveler to Allah resides at a station. But there has to be some traveling to Allah. Here there was no traveling to Allah for you to call this the first station, because they were dormant in ignorance. So it doesn't qualify as a station. But some scholars have tried to justify it by saying, true, there was no spiritual wayfaring to Allah, but there was some form of wayfaring. Okay, it was ila nafs, wayfaring towards one's ego, or ila al-adat, towards one's habits, daily routine, but there was some kind of movement of some sort before residing in this station of awakening. And then certain triggers come around and arise, and it triggers that person to awake. But it doesn't matter whether you want to, I'm just giving the reason why in some books they don't use this as the first station, and in some books they do. It's because of this technical point. Now, the next question now that arises is, what triggers the person for them to awake? Does this awakening arise from outside oneself, outside one's will, outside one's control? For example, the words of a scholar, the words of a dua. Does that make the trigger? What the scholar said, what the book said, what the person said? Or does the triggering arise from within? And the answer is, it arises from within. Perfection is a function of the I. Spirituality is a function of one's intentions. You can't find perfection, that inner perfection, from outside yourself. those things that lie outside you, those things per se can't trigger anything. If there's any triggering, it starts within. Yes, they may lay the preliminary scaffolding to something, but the inner readiness has to be there for you to awake. Otherwise, whatever the scholar says, however much you read the Quran, however many times you read Dua, however many times you go to ziyarat, if the inner readiness isn't there, the trigger won't arise. Now, so it's not a random process. There has to be an inner readiness. Then the question now arises, what's this inner readiness all about? Then the answer becomes quite difficult for people to swallow. Here it gets difficult now. The discussions are a bit... And I don't want you to panic or anything. I'm just sharing a few words. You don't have to. But then they say, no, there are 1,001 parameters in play in relation to a person's inner readiness. Now, what does that mean? The intentions, the ethics, the dispositions, the spiritual status quo of our parents has a significant role on the spiritual status quo and temperament of the offspring. That's the first thing. But even more so, let's go a bit higher than that. According to the logic of traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, the intentions, actions, spirituality, the manner of thinking, not only of parents, but grandparents, great-grand, keep on going, ancestors, has a role, a significant role, in the well-being, spiritual, mental and bodily, of the offspring. So we believe in this, in Islam. We believe that the way our ancestors, up to our parents, thought, earned, behaved, intended, all have an effect on the offspring. Some more than others, yes, it's possible. 1,001 parameters in play for that inner readiness. Yes, you may say, is that fair? Without a doubt, some people are born with a head start than others. Is that fair? Let's give a medical example, then we'll come back to the spiritual example. A mother and father, for example, they smoke. The mother smokes or drinks or whatever. Another set of parents, they don't drink or smoke. One child is born with limbs, one is born without limbs. Actually, they have a head start of some sort. Is that fair? Well, of course it's not fair, but this unfairness, who are you attributing it to? Don't attribute unfairness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's to the parents. And let's go back to spirituality. Yes, some people have that inner readiness more than others at birth. But it's the work of the ancestors up to the parents. Pure thoughts, pure ethics, pure earning, pure thinking, no sins, leads to a pure offspring. These generations of our ancestors, it's not as if it's mutually exclusive. Responsibility is conveyed from generation to generation. Why do we think about the environment? Why do we care of the environment for future generations? This responsibility. The same with spirituality. Those ancestors, up to one's parents, who had pure thoughts, pure earning, it's going to pass on. Therefore, some are born at an advantage, okay, than others, because of what the ancestors did. Up to now, until birth, the birth of the offspring, destiny was in the hand of the ancestors. Then 2 months, or after 9 months of gestation, here the mother has an important role. Destiny lies more in the hands of the mother now. How the mother is thinking, what she's consuming, with what kind of money. Then she's feeding, breastfeeding. The traditions are incredible in relation to breastfeeding. In those days, 1400 years ago, it was a common practice. They would give their children to pious women to breastfeed, in addition to the mother, but they would give it to pious mother. The traditions are explicit. Noble ethical traits passes through the milk. We have this in Islam, spiritual genetics, if you like. So up to 2 years, destiny is in the hands of the mother mainly, and the father. Up to 14 years, up to puberty, still the degree of rationality of the child is still limited. That's why Islam comes with all these protocols for the parents to do for the child. Then after puberty, destiny slowly becomes in the hands of the child, him or herself. Look at from the ancestors to the parents, to the milking, to the gestation, all this for 14 years of upbringing. All this, the destiny was outside the hands of the child, him or herself. Is it fair? No, of course not. But the unfairness isn't to do with Allah. Attributed to the people, the ancestors, the mother, the father, how the parents brought up the child for the first 14 years. Some, therefore, as a result of their ancestors, have a good start. There's no guarantee, though. Some have a bad start, but they can reach perfection. The road to perfection is never closed. But responsibility is conveyed. It's not as if one generation is totally disconnected to the next. We have so many traditions that even at the time of conception, how they're thinking has an effect. One tradition, it's a very long one, with the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's given a prescription on the wedding night to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Now some people say the tradition's weak. It may be weak, but we have so many of these traditions. One of the prescriptions was لا تجامع امرأتك بشهوة امرأة غيرك. Don't be intimate with your wife whilst thinking of another woman at the time of intimacy. Why? فإني, the Holy Prophet is saying, أخشى, I'm afraid, I fear. Meaning the potential is there. No one is saying it's definitive. It's not a cause and effect. As I said, 1001 different parameters are in play. We don't know what the final cause will be, what the final link, from where it will come. But the potential is there. I fear, إن قضي بينكما ولد, if a son is to be born, أن يكون مؤنثا مخنثا مخبلا. The son will be woman-like, gender-wise, and woman-like, anatomy-wise, and insane. I'm not saying it's a definite, but the potential is there. The tradition is a very long tradition, but some of the illnesses are spiritual. If you do this, X, Y, Z at the time, it leads to these spiritual illnesses. Some of the illnesses are bodily and physical. All because of few minutes how one is thinking. However, if one's parents, grandparents, have you ever thought why we believe in ismat, infallibility? You have to understand the rational basis to infallibility. It's part of aqa'id. You can't do taqleed in aqa'id because aqa'id, Islamic doctrine per se, the knowledge per se, builds the soul. That's why you can't do aqa'id. You can't do taqleed in aqa'id. You have to understand yourself. You can learn from others, but you have to understand it yourself. You can't say because he said so. Why? Because the knowledge itself builds the spirit. Ahkam, the do's and don'ts, the knowledge itself doesn't build the spirit. Whether you know it or not, the knowledge itself, it's the acting by that knowledge which builds the spirit. That's why it's okay. You can do taqleed in ahkam. You're not losing out. You don't have to know and strive to know the do's and don'ts. You just listen to what the most learned one has. Now the rational basis to infallibility, if someone has pure thoughts, everything pure, thinking, their ethics, earning, that offspring won't even require an ustad. They don't require guidance from outside. They're so pure, they're in contact with angels. Seeing angels is a function of one's purity. That's those stories with the Holy Prophet at 1, 2, 3 years of age, speaking with the angels. They were pure at birth. You know, medicine is going in this direction. They say, for example, the woman who was living in X area, which is polluted, a lot of noise, X, Y, and Z, the child will be less tranquil, less at peace than a child that is born in this area. But these are still mental links they're making. Spirituality is some way to go yet, but they're going in that direction. All these make a difference. But imagine one's ancestors, up to one's parents, pure thoughts, pure earning, no sins. That child will be born pure. That we call ismat. It's infallibility now. Why? Because of the purity, they're in contact with angels. Angels are guiding them. They don't need guidance from a scholar or a book anymore. They don't need it. They're being guided by angels. And the stories of the prophets show that. But for me and you, because of the baggage that through the generations came to us, and that degree of pollution, we need guidance. We need the Quran. We need the book. We need the Prophet. We're in need of guidance. We can't do without it. We're not ma'soom. Sometimes you see the child is good. The parents aren't good though. Why is this child very different to one's parents? Go back. Their ancestors may have done something. It eventually, for whatever reason, 1001 parameters in play, it was realized in this child. It's possible. For example, look at converts. Do you think it's easy to convert from, let's say, Christianity to Islam? It's impossible. You can't convert. We take it for granted. Because we were born Muslim, we take it for granted. But it's something almost impossible. And then you see someone converting at 20, at 16, at 25. How can they? Their ancestors, Christians or whatever religion, did good deeds. They're never unanswered. Passes down. It became realized in this offspring many generations down. They became a Muslim. They made an effort too. But you can't disregard what the ancestors did. And when the convert becomes a Muslim, it's a day of jubilee for all those ancestors in Barzakh, wherever they are. They will benefit, they'll reap the benefits. Some sins have an effect on the offspring negatively more than other sins. One sin which has a very bad effect on the offspring, although the road to perfection is still open for that offspring, but it has a very bad effect. One action which the parents do is if they conceive out of wedlock, what they call illegitimate children, for example. But before I speak about this, in Islam there's no bias against illegitimate children. They don't have a bias. They're equal to those who are born legitimately, status-wise. It's culture which brings those taboos. However, it leaves the potential is very significant now. Potential to spiritual downfall is more than other sins for this newly born offspring. Is it fair? Of course not, but the parents did that. Right? The parents who drink alcohol, the child is born without limbs. Is that fair? No. Why is it for the medical example, the physical, everyone accepts it's the parents' fault? For example, the women, they go to the midwife every week. It's very important for them. They want to monitor the physical well-being of the child. They go every week to the doctor, to the midwife. They have ultrasound, this, that, every time. But spirituality-wise, do they go to the spiritual doctor to see what they have to do before conception, after conception, in gestation? And then when problems arise with the child, now it's too late. Then they go to the spiritual doctor. Can you do some miracle to reverse this problem? No, Islam is not about magic. We have no problem with the medical side. When it comes to the spiritual side, no one. It's very, very few people. If you speak about it too much, then they'll attribute names to you. But it becomes significant. The potential for spiritual downfall is more significant now in those children. But the road to perfection is open. They may become so knowledgeable more than any manager, more than any judge. It's possible. But because of that significant potential for downfall, Islam enters the scene here and tells them one thing, that you're equal to anyone else. Your road to perfection is there, like anyone else. But one thing we have to limit you, those who are born out of wedlock, or conceived out of wedlock. In relation to those posts and those positions that involve the guidance of the masses, don't enter those, please. That's a limitation. Don't be a judge. Don't be a manager. Not because they're any lower than anyone else. It's because it exists innately within them as a result of what their parents did. That significant potential for downfall, Islam, out of precaution, doesn't want to give these sensitive posts to them. Not that they're lower in any way, but Islam has a responsibility for the guidance of the masses at the end of the day. It has to come with some principles here. It has to guide the masses. Everything else, these are just taboos that unfortunately cultures bring with them. Yes. Okay. So this was about that inner readiness. So many factors at play. Okay. So the first station, that we said, awakening. There are 3 elements to awakening. We're slowly going into the definition now. 3 essential components to awakening. Now when we say 3 essential components to awakening, we either mean you have to do these 3 to awake, or we're saying, look at these 3, if you have them, you have woken up from the sleep of ignorance, from oblivion, and so on and so forth. But the first interpretation is more on a par with the prima facie meaning of what the scholars have said. You have to do these 3 in order to wake up. These 3 have to be done. 3 elements. Today I want to go through these 3, and then tomorrow inshallah we'll speak about how to acquire these 3 action-wise. Let's first understand what these 3 are, and then how we have to acquire them. The first element to awakening is having an attentiveness with respect to Allah's blessings. Acknowledging one is drowned in Allah's blessings, totally surrounded by them. One's existence, one's attributes of perfection, one's life, one's knowledge, power, and so on and so forth. These are all but Allah's blessings. One has to appreciate in this first element that one can't know of the whatness and the number of His blessings. You never know, in relation to anything, what it really is. And there's a reason for that. And also in relation to the number of blessings, you can't count them. Here in this first element, you have to be in despair. That despair has to come in. That neither do I know the whatness of these blessings, what they, deep down what they are, and how much they are. Also, one has to acknowledge it's all His favour, all Allah's grace upon us, and that you aren't deserving. It's not as if you have a right to this and then Allah provides. These things have to be incorporated within. Also in this first element, acknowledging that we can never rightfully compensate for Allah's blessings. Either we act ungratefully, we don't consume and spend those blessings given us in the right direction, or even if we do spend it in the right direction and on a par with Allah's satisfaction, still it's all through Allah's guidance. The power through which you spend X, Y, Z blessings, it's through Allah's power. The will that you have doing these things, it's through Allah's will. Now the deeper you go into these thought processes, those 5 or 6 points I mentioned, slowly you begin to see or acknowledge the realities surrounding you. How you'll find yourself more and more embarrassed before Allah, more and more indebted to Allah, more and more helpless before Allah. And that's good. Something's moving now within. That helplessness, it's starting now. In chapter 31, verse 20, Alam taraw, don't you see? Whenever you see the word seeing in the Quran, pay attention to it. Don't limit it to a physical seeing. You see the word seeing, just pay attention a bit more. Focus a bit more. Alam taraw, don't you see? Anna Allah, that Allah sakhara lakum, has subjugated before you what? Ma fi samawati wa ma fil ard, that which is in the heavens and earth. He's subjugated all that is before you. It's all under your control. وَأَسْبَغَ عَلَيْكُمْ, He's coloured before you. He's drowned you with ni'amahu, with His blessings. ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنَةً. Those that are apparent and some are hidden. Some blessings are hidden. This verse goes on a par with what we've been saying, acknowledging, being attentive to Allah's blessings. We have to pontificate, deliberate over this, until that despair, that helplessness starts within. But there's a deeper meaning also. Maybe there's one esoteric dimension one can extrapolate here. Don't you see that Allah has subjugated lakum, before you, this long preposition again, meaning in unity with you. Before the previous translation, we treated the preposition with its standard meaning of for you. But now it's in unity with you. Allah has put these under your control, in unity with you. What? Whatever's in the heavens and earth. Oh, what does that mean now? Here, Imam Khomeini, rahmatullah alayhi, in Adab al-Salat, in one of the chapters there, he defines philosophy, quoting the scholars, saying that philosophy is the conversion of the man, the physical man, me and you, into an immaterial world that is on a par with, that matches the physical world, form-wise, perfection-wise. He just gives this in passing, and he doesn't enter into any discussion on it. That it's all about me and you becoming an immaterial world which matches the physical world, but now it's within. It's a dimension of you now. Man is a multi-dimensional being, from the earthly to the metaphysical realms. Dimensions of you, the I. Now, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Al-Muli, he's explained this in one of his books. First of all, we have traditions also referring to this. The famous ones from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This concept of man becoming an immaterial world, he says, تَحْسَبُ أَنَّكَ جِرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ. Do you think you're a piece of flesh, a little flesh? That's it? 80 kilograms of flesh? That's it? He says, no. وَفِيكَ أَنْتَ وَالْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. In you, there's a greater world. Within. Fika, within you. Go to spiritual dimensions now. Get out of the physical world now. Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, in one of his books, I managed to find, he does explain this very eloquently. Although this requires a lecture of its own, I just choose to write paragraphs, and I just want to read only one paragraph for you. But before that, just one introduction, which he opens up. He says, look, this coexistence, whatever is a manifestation of Allah's attributes. The sun, the moon, whatever is, these are manifestations of Allah's attributes. Then, he brings a verse that Allah taught Adam all the names. He says that's man's identity, being a manifestation of all of Allah's attributes. Whatever is in the world is a manifestation of Allah's attributes. You too can be a manifestation of all of Allah's attributes. And therefore you can also lead to the formation of whatever is in the world. But your world is immaterial. That was the introduction. Then he gives examples. If you pay attention to this, the essence of shafa'ah also can be extracted from this, but that's not the purpose I'm reading this. He says, by way of example, they will call you, me and you, Jibra'il. Jibra'il has an existence in the cosmos. Okay, it's metaphysical. You can be an immaterial world. Whatever exists can lie within you, be a dimension of you. They will call you Jibra'il if one informs another from the metaphysical realms. If you reach that stage where you enter the metaphysical realms and inform others of the truths that you acquired, you have Jibra'il in your own immaterial world. Jibra'il being a dimension, a product of your soul. Jibra'il manifesting, not the actual Jibra'il coming into your soul. No, this is immaterial realms now. He's manifesting within you. Like he did with Lady Maryam, alayhi salam. So if we were there, we wouldn't have seen Archangel Gabriel, because she wasn't seeing with the physical eye. They will call you Mikael, another angel, if one offers and donates ma'arif and noble ethics, makarim, to those who seek it. If you acquire ma'arif and noble ethics and donate it to others, you are Mikael now. Mikael is within. That immaterial world with your angels, it's all within. See, in the hereafter, it's you and your actions. The hereafter is an embodiment of your actions. You seeing angels, embodiment of your actions. They will call you Israfil if they convey ma'ad and the return to those who search for it. If they allow people to enter the hereafter, that's difficult. That mutu qabla an tamutu, if you teach it to others, for them to practice, so they enter their ma'ad before their physical death, you become Israfil. They call you Israel if you kill the traveller to Allah. You kill the traveller's nafsul ammara. That soul that commands the evil, you kill that in the traveller to Allah, you are Israel. They'll then, 3 dots, I skipped a bit, he gives other examples, I can't go through all of them. Now he goes into prophets. They'll call you Adam. Do you want to see Adam in the hereafter? They'll call you Adam, alayhi salam, if one teaches those who are looking for guidance. They'll call you Noah, alayhi salam, if one saves those stuck and struck in the storm of affliction. They'll call you Ibrahim, alayhi salam, if you let go of the fire of existence, killing that which is Nimrod, Philic, and becoming Allah's friend. They'll call you Musa, alayhi salam, if one drowns the pharaonic existence within the Nile of non-existence, and who calls upon the beloved on the mount of proximity. They'll call you Khidr if one attains to ladunni knowledge, that direct knowledge from Allah. Then he gives example, they'll call you Elias, Luqman, Plato, Solomon, Isa, the Mahdi, alayhimu salam, and all these. Then he adds, now it goes to creation, they'll call you the sun If one's compassion shines on all, the sun that we have now is an attribute of Allah's attribute of being all compassionate. You be all compassionate, you will have a sun in your hereafter, dimension of the soul. If you show compassion on all, you'll be clouds if one satiates the seekers with ma'arif. And he keeps on going. And that is enough just to understand what it means to become the immaterial world. Okay. Then we come to the second element. To try to finish the second and third elements so that we start with the mechanisms of acquiring them tomorrow, inshallah. In the second element now, here the second element to awakening. You have to become acquainted with one's sins, one's spiritual crimes, one's oppressions, vice, errors. You have to scrutinize them. Acknowledge you've done wrong. Acknowledge you've been distanced from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Appreciate this has to be mended and why. Appreciate that you have to free yourself from all these veils of darkness. Want from Allah to be freed. Serious endeavor is required. It's all about one's spiritual crimes. Look at the word now the scholars have used. These are crimes that we're doing. But we sin and it's nothing. It's as if we've done nothing wrong. Why? Because we haven't woken up yet. We're still in the sleep of ignorance. This has to be sorted. It's an essential ingredient, the second element to awakening. So look, in the first two, in the first you're saying, I'm engrossed in all these blessings, Allah. In the second you're saying, is this how I've behaved? With all these blessings, is this what I've done? And with these two now, you're beginning to evaluate yourself. And if you succeed, you're growing, you're moving a bit now. It's beginning to happen, this awakening. It's an accumulative effect. If you forget, there are plenty of things that will remind you, namely in Du'a Kumail. Allahumma Mawlai, oh Allah, my Master. Kam min qabihin satarta. How many an ugly act have you concealed? I appreciate you've done something ugly. With the du'as, I'm not saying this from my own, people like Imam Khomeini and others have always said this, that you don't need to finish a dua from beginning to end. Some du'as are long. Don't tire yourself, especially with the children. Things like Du'a Kumail, and I do it with my own son. I tell him, just pick one sentence, let's discuss it. Because children can easily get tired sometimes. It'll have a negative effect on them. But every week, if you just open one sentence for them, some children like to. They're ready to stay there for 2 hours, that's okay. But try to acknowledge which type your child is. They have to understand these du'as. They don't have to finish them and not understand anything. Although Du'a Kumail is a very important sunnah, it's a custom, it's important. But don't let things, customs, compromise the spiritual well-being of your child. Don't overdo it with them. Overdoing even du'as can be poison to children. How many of an ugly act have you concealed from Allah? Look, at being acquainted with one's sins, one's vices. وَكَمْ مِنْ فَادِهٍ مِنَ الْبَلَاءِ أَقَلْتَ. How many of a heavy burden have you reversed? وَكَمْ مِنْ إِثَارٍ وَقِيتَ. How many a slip, how many a stumble of mine have you controlled? This should remind you of this second element to awakening. وَكَمْ مِنْ مَكْرُوهٍ دَفَعْتَ. How many a misfortune have you prevented? وَكَمْ مِنْ ثَنَاءٍ جَمِيلٍ لَسْتُ أَهْلًا لَهُ نَشَرْتَ. How many a lovely praise that I wasn't worthy of have you disseminated, spread out to others? Allahumma, oh Allah. Adhuma balai. Allah, my trials are great. Wa afrata bi su'u hali. My bad states have transgressed. Wa qasurat bi a'mali. My actions, O Allah, have taken lightly. Wa qa'adat bi aqlali. O Allah, these the chains of passions, they've held me down onto the ground. وَحَبَسَنِي النَّفْءِ بُعْدُ أَمَلِي. These long-term worldly desires of mine have imprisoned me, preventing me of any benefit. This was the main clause, this one. وَخَدَعَتْنِ الدُّنْيَا بِغُرُورِهَا وَنَفْسِي بِجِنَايَتِهَا. And the world, O Allah, has tricked me with its deceptions. Why do we call the world Darul Ghurur, abode of deceptions? Because it's in a way that when we see something, we think that's it. Being oblivious to Allah. These are signs to Allah. These are all manifestations of Allah. But we just see the external side and say, that's it. It deceives you. وَنَفْسِي بِجِنَايَتِهَا وَمِثَالِي. And my nafs has deceived me with its crimes, with its inner struggles. It's deceived me. See, these are crimes if only we knew. A sin is a crime. Yes, if someone sins, don't jump on them all. You have to have compassion, try to guide them and everything. This is for our personal journey. You see it as a crime first. You sort this out for yourself first. And then finally, I'll just quickly finish this up. The third element, because in the first element, one is hoped to have observed how all these blessings one is surrounded with and how one has fallen short in relation to all these blessings. In the second element, that feeling of indebtedness and how you've done wrong in relation to the blessings and your sins. Now you want to find out to what degree you're at a loss. You want to know this. How much behind am I? To what extent am I behind? And here in this third element, an essential ingredient and final element too, this awakening, it's acknowledging what constitutes your harm and gain. You have to know what your harm or gain lies in. It's knowledge now. You have to know. Because without this knowledge, it'll prevent you from... It can't prevent you, if you don't have this knowledge, it won't prevent you from further wasting yourself and losing out in the future. You have to have this knowledge to know. Without this knowledge, one can't assign direction in the future or to the future. Without this knowledge, one can't compensate for one's true losses. One can't free one's future's opportunities. The knowledge is there, you have to know. So these were the three elements, essential ingredients, required for awakening to arise. Otherwise we're all asleep and we'll all wake up after death. It's too late. Tomorrow, inshallah, now, what the effectors, the causes are to acquire and succeed in these three elements action-wise. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.